I've decided to try something different. Throughout the month of December, I will upload 12 videos, which is probably more than what I've uploaded in the last 2 years up top. All of these videos, however, will focus on one episode from each incarnation of the Doctor. Yes, I'm even watching the TV movie. That's how dedicated I am to this. And yes, I know we're up to 13 Doctors, but I haven't watched any of her, so she gets excluded. I don't know whether to call it Doctor Who December or the 12 Days of Doctor Who. So let's just use both. I've chosen stories for these videos that I've enjoyed for one reason or another. Yes, I'm gonna roast them as well as review them, but I believe these should be part of the quintessential viewing of Doctor Who. This is obvious with an Unearthly Child because sci-fi law requires that you watch it. Not everyone will agree with my choices or my criticisms, and I'll explain my reasoning for each throughout this series. Regardless of how crappy the special effects are or what you make of the story, these videos are intended to highlight not only the greatness of this fantastic franchise, but also just to have a good old laugh at some science fiction. So for today's episode, we'll start with the original Doctor himself, Mr. William Hartnell, as he's the first Doctor, and I'm pretty sure I know where the number 1 comes in the number sequence. I kind of feel obligated to review An Unearthly Child as it's the first episode of Doctor Who December and the first ever episode of Doctor Who. I can only imagine what it was like to sit down in 1963 and watch a very blurry policeman wander around near a junkyard with a very unstable camera. So after loitering around in the junkyard, we are introduced to teachers Barbara and Ian, who both teach a girl named Susan Foreman. One teaches history, one teaches science, but both can agree that Susan is ludicrously smart and is almost certainly related to Sheldon Cooper. They think she's weird, and I can see the subtle undertones that they think she's being abused or something at home, so they make this plan to stalk her home from school? What? I get this was the 60s, but man, these guys are getting so much trouble for offering an underage kid a ride home. I know they have good intentions, but still. I suppose it was the 60s and things were safer back then. I mean, my grandma used to tell me stories about walking to the bus stop in the 1940s on her own at 4 years old. That's insane! Also, this is our introduction to Susan. What is this supposed to be? What kind of dancing is that? Even I can dance better than that. And I'm the sort of person who sprains their ankle by tripping over their own feet. I really don't like Susan, to be honest. At least, I don't like her at this point in the show. Her personality seems really unstable and seems to swing back and forth between sweet, innocent young girl to holy bananas, we're all gonna die! Ah!
Look, she is 15. She might be meeting a boy.
Ah, yes. Because a junkyard is definitely the best place to have a smooch. I mean, I've seen people snog in the supermarket, so I guess anywhere is fair game. Funny story, when I worked in customer service, I remember seeing a couple making out next to a fridge full of soft drinks and blindly attempt to grab a drink while snogging for a solid 30 seconds. So Ian and Barbara head into the junkyard and find a police box.
Feel it. Feel it, you feel it?
It's a faint vibration.
It's alive.
Yes, but we won't really see any of that till later seasons, so shut up. All of a sudden, a wild Hartnell appears.
Oh no, Grandfather, no!
Let me go. No! Get back to the ship, child.
Susan, I think you'd better stop. I think your granddad's ready to strangle you so hard that you regenerate.
I understand these people better than you. Their minds reject things they don't understand.
In a few incarnations, that title will be passed on to him. I find a couple of things interesting about this Doctor. For starters, he seems to be a bit of a sociopath.
I want to see your faces when you try to explain away your behaviour to a policeman.
And he is obsessed with keeping the TARDIS a secret. By the time you get to Matt Smith, the whole bloody universe knows about the TARDIS, so he obviously doesn't do a good job at it. What's with all these extreme close-ups, by the way? Was this just a 60s camera thing? I really don't want close-ups of the characters when it's not necessary. It's also not exciting to have close-ups of them staring off into space while the TARDIS flies. So the TARDIS takes off, and I love the shot of it just standing in the middle of this wasteland. Now, is it just me, or is it hard to hear parts of the theme song at the start of episode 2? Who knows, maybe I'm just old and have wrecked my ears from listening to too much MCR. Also, I must point out how there's already a bunch of useless crap lying around in the TARDIS. Just imagine how much cleaning out he could do by the time he turns into Tom Baker. Especially when you remember that scene with Sarah in Victoria's dress.
Doctor, look what I found.
Hello, Vicky.
What?
Oops, my mistake. It's not a wasteland. It's Earth, however many billion years younger. What caused them to fall unconscious? Why are the Doctor and Susan still upright? The TARDIS didn't do its usual violent takeoff, so what's their excuse apart from being hungover? I'm also very, very glad that they dropped this use of each individual episode being given a different title rather than being part 1, 2, etc. Not only will they run out of names for episodes by about season 5, it becomes incredibly confusing. So it turns out we've landed on prehistoric Earth and are introduced to a bunch of cavemen who look rather suspiciously like modern humans, and they sound like it too.
My father made fire.
They killed him for it.
I suppose I should be thankful for their use of civilized language. I'd go crazy if I had to sit through 3 more episodes of me want fire, me go hunt bear for food. Dude, that is not how you snort stuff, trust me.
Cal is no leader.
The leader is the one who makes fire.
Can you imagine this is how elections worked in modern society? We elected our Prime Minister on his ability to set up a decent campfire to boil the kettle on?
Just open the doors, Dr. Foreman.
Eh? Doctor Who? What are you talking about?
Yes, title drop! They have to constantly drop references to him being the grandfather when I feel she could have easily just as passed as being his daughter. She never looked or felt young enough to be the granddaughter to me.
But it is ridiculous. Time doesn't go round and round in circles. You can't get on and off whenever you like in the past or the future.
Really? Where does time go then?
It doesn't go anywhere. It just happens and then it's finished.
It's a ball of wibbly wobbly. Funny how here he has to go off on an expedition and snort some plants in order to work out what year it is. And a few thousand years later, he's eating dirt in order to work out what year it is. If it works, I guess.
There's still a police box. Why hasn't it changed?
Because we've been given the budget of a ham and tuna sandwich for the first season. I don't get how this was supposed to be an educational show. By the time we get into any actual educational stuff, you've fallen asleep from boredom. Also, since when did he smoke pipes? Was this an early installment weirdness thing? Even if he gave himself lung cancer, he could keep doing it for the rest of his lives, I suppose, because the lungs would just keep regenerating.
It's got the key codes of all the machines and the ships, and it's got notes of everywhere we've been to. Something terrible's happened to him, and we must find it.
Susan needs to stop going from calm to hysteria. I seriously want Edna to pop out from behind a bush and tell her to pull yourself together. So the doctor gets kidnapped and dragged off to this mysterious cave where it turns out cavemen invented sandwiches centuries before the Earl of Sandwich did. The only 2 cavemen whose names I could actually work out were Zart and Cal. And being typical cavemen, their names aren't even 2 syllables long. There is at least a full 5 minutes of arguing about who was the better fire maker. I'm falling asleep here.
Take me back to my ship and I will make fire for you. All the fire you want.
So much for the non-interference policy. I bet him and Captain Kirk would share the same opinion towards the Prime Directive. And I am glad to see that Susan's hysterical episodes finally come to some use in this botched rescue attempt. To be honest, I still can't get over how this show got past the first episode. Don't get me wrong, I'm very glad it did, but still. Also, it took me 2 episodes to work out that the orb they keep referring to is actually the sun. Our heroes are tied up and thrown into the Cave of Skulls, which as far as I can tell has hardly any skulls.
They're all the same. They've been split open.
Does that count as a split? Looks more like a big ol' hole to me. Explain to me why they don't just undo the knots themselves. There's 4 of them. Ditch the stones and just untie each other. We are also shown that cavemen apparently sleep in huddles like penguins. I mean, unless they're in the middle of winter or live in Scotland or something, why do they need to do this? Vsauce taught me that the average global temperature is 15 degrees Celsius. So that isn't quite low enough to warrant a huddle. And surely this is going to be the worst thing ever. Imagine the smell. What if you're an insomniac? What if you have restless legs? Or someone farts. This just seems like a bad idea.
We must all take it in turns and try and cut his hands free.
Oh, surely we should get the girls.
No, we've got to free you first. You're the strongest and you may have to defend us.
I can hear the feminists shouting from here. Sexist pig! What he needs is a jolly good smack bottom. And of course, despite being faced with the possibility of death, these guys just can't stop arguing. But all is not lost, because the old woman decides to go in with the knife and slaughter our heroes. Wait, never mind. She just wants them to take their fire and skedaddle. But of course, a couple of other cavemen are listening and decide to break into the cave with the least effective rock-pushing technique I have ever seen. That has definitely got to pull some muscles. And so begins the second escape attempt, which doesn't last long before the smoker doctor here has to take a break.
Just a minute. Let me have it.
We can't stop here.
Just a moment.
Look, we've got to go further
I
on.
know that. I must get free. I must breathe.
Funny how he's so weak and pathetic when he's young, but by the time he gets to David Tennant, he sprints pretty much everywhere like a 5-year-old. It also looks like Barbara has caught the hysteria disease as well, because all it takes is her to fall over for her to start losing it. She and Ian keep holding each other so often, I keep expecting them to kiss. They then waste more time arguing, and this time, it's long enough for the other cavemen to catch up with them. Hey, let's cry at the top of our lungs so they'll know where we are.
Yes, he's just been killed. By a larger animal, too.
Ooh, Let's hope Peter aren't watching this serial. So the male caveman, I think it's Zar, I'm still not sure, gets attacked by some wild animal and Barbara just has to go and be a decent human being and stays behind to help him. Maybe this dude was supposed to die in history and it would have been the reason fire got invented or something. In the Aztecs, the doctor gives Barbara a long rant on how you can't change history, and here she is changing it. I like to think that maybe experiences like this are what compels the doctor to change and become the healer Riversong later says he will be known as. Like he tries to frickin' murder this caveman. What kind of a healer kills his patient? Yeah, let's not talk about you, Chase. I'm also surprised this old woman hasn't died yet from all the shoving. Never mind. Our heroes are then greeted with the entire tribe who managed to beat them to the TARDIS. How? How did you get there without being spotted or hurt? Confession prompts Ian and the doctor to start the first ever stoning, which lasts about 10 seconds. Very exciting stuff. So they drive Cal / the old woman murderer away and lock up our heroes back in the Cave of Skulls, who promptly decide to make some fire. I seriously wonder if they had to pad out this scene until Ian's actor managed to make some fire, or if they just blew cigarette ashes onto the grass from off screen.
Tell me more of what happened.
Well, they kind of just poured some water on you. That's it. And then an epic fight worthy of the first lightsaber battle begins. I got my hopes up that one of their fur coats would catch on fire, but they were extinguished. But surprise, 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 despite making fire for the tribe, they still won't let our heroes go. And this was the BBC's way of teaching kids that life isn't fair. And then surprisingly, Susan comes up with a clever escape plan. Let's light some skulls on fire. I love how cheerfully Ian tells everyone that we're gonna die.
And then to all intents and purposes, we're going to die.
Woohoo! And surprisingly, this plan works. These cavemen are so stupid that they don't need to see the whole body. They only see the skull and think, yeah, okay, they've gone to the great orb in the sky. What a shame. We can make a religion out of these people. They've got a teleporting box and everything. So the Doctor and co escape and manage to get back to the TARDIS, which then promptly lands on another barren wasteland.
Well, I suggest before we go outside and explore, let us clean ourselves up.
Yes, I would wash that smoke, dust, dirt, maybe blood out of your hair.
Now, what does the radiation read, Susan?
It's reading normal, Grandfather.
Ah, Susan. You made the fatal mistake of looking at the monitor too soon and too quickly. This reading indicates to me that they could have landed in Chernobyl, but then I remembered that this was 1963, and that hasn't happened yet. Wibbly wobbly. So yeah, this isn't the most exciting serial, but we have to remember that this was the pilot. Pilots are rarely fantastic. I'll make an exception for House and Phineas and Ferb. The show really starts to take off in the following serials, so while we suffer through the boring caveman story, the idea that a great future lies ahead for this franchise is a very comforting thought. Next time in the TARDIS, we go on an expedition with the Cosmic Hobo, dive into a trash can, and meet the wimpiest companion of all time.